Hey everyone, and welcome to the Nomad channel, where I talk about location and financial independence. I try to help with tips, tools, and techniques to help you make a living and a life. If you are interested in these types of topics, please click the like button, click subscribe, and the bell so you can get reminders when new videos are coming out. Now, today's topic that I wanted to address is something they hear a lot about in a lot of the groups that I'm in. Lots of groups around financial independence, location independence, digital nomads, remote workers, all of it. And the framing around choices that people are trying to make. There are lots of people who want to embark on this type of change. They either want to work remotely or they want to live abroad. And they're not sure where to start. They have lots of questions and they're just trying to make decisions. And quite frankly, they have some fear and trepidation around it, right? They're not quite sure about what to do. And a lot of the responses that I hear really trouble me because I just don't think the framing is helpful. I hear lots of people responding in the comments saying, don't be afraid, just jump out here and leap, and don't be scared. And it's like, why are so many people scared? And it's like, this framing around fear, I just find inefficient. I don't think being afraid or not being afraid is the proper spectrum on which we need to judge this. Because quite frankly, people are dealing with a lot of things and they want some assurances. And yes, you will be taking some chances. You will be doing some new things, whether you're launching a new business, whether you're launching a new life abroad, or doing both, which I've done. But I think that it's more important to think about these things in terms of the risk involved and mitigating those risks. It's about risk mitigation. There's always a risk in everything. There's a risk if you jump in your car and drive out in traffic. There's a risk of things happening, but you still do it. But what you do is you mitigate the risk by doing things like hopefully driving under the speed limit, wearing a safety belt, paying attention and not being distracted. These are all little techniques that you use to reduce the risk of something bad happening. Also having insurance, which is a big one. I think we overlook a lot of times. So I kind of wanted to just talk about this and dive into and dispel some of these myths around whether or not someone's being scared if they are asking these types of questions. And I wanted to start with one of the examples. As I was traveling a few years ago here in Mexico City, I'd met a friend in Colombia, and we were walking the streets here, and we were going across the street against the traffic light. And she said, I didn't want to cross. She says, what, are you scared? And it just took me aback because I was like, first of all, I'm not in the 8th grade. That doesn't work anymore. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that you say when you're on the playground. You scared to jump your bike over the ditch or something like that. So it wasn't about fear. It was about risk mitigation. And it's simple. One, I don't trust drivers anywhere on the planet. And if you've lived in Mexico City, you know what I'm talking about. Even when you get the green light, people drive against the light and run the red light. I've had this happen so many times. Even in my morning commute on the way to the coffee shop here in Condesa, it's the same thing constantly. Almost guaranteed they're gonna run that red light. They're just in a hurry, they're not paying attention. So for me, it wasn't about being scared, it's about looking at that risk and reward. What do I gain if I cross the street to grab those extra, 20 seconds? Ahead? Like this, it's not worth it. The risk is someone does exactly that. I get clipped, I waste a day in the hospital, or just waste time having to deal with the collision on the street. And I've actually had a friend that this happened to in Colombia a couple of years ago, where they did get hit crossing the street by someone on a scooter who was weaving in and out. So when you look at it in terms of this risk mitigation or risk and reward, it's not about fear. It's about, what am I going to gain? And is it really worth it? Just those extra seconds. And that's kind of what I wanted people to think about when we move this into a more appropriate example when it comes to moving abroad. And someone says, and I've actually seen this question come up a couple of times. Someone has a job in the US right now, and they may temporarily be able to work remotely. And so some people will say, hey, how can I take this job overseas? I'm ready to make this leap. I've got a job, so I've got the income. Now I want to go ahead and do it. Should I tell my employer? And I talk about telling your employer in a video I'll link to here and in the description, so that you can see some of the other topics or things to consider when it comes to that. But in this situation, it was simple as saying, can I just use a VPN and hide that I'm away. And I talked about this in that video and talked about an experience that a friend of mine had where they were able to get away with it for quite some time. And then something happened. And now, of course, the systems are far more advanced than they even were like 5 or 6 years ago. And they're able to detect very easily where you are, even when you're using these types of tools. And it wasn't about the fear, although that's what someone said in the comments. They said, well, you shouldn't be scared. You should just leave a job and start a business. And I'm like, wait a minute. There's a lot of steps in between leaving the job and starting a business. There's so much risk involved in that versus the simple step of maybe eventually that person will get there. Maybe that's not what they want to do. Maybe they don't care about being an entrepreneur. They're looking at the situation and saying, I asked a question about mitigating the risk and being able to work directly and work remotely from this current job. That's it. That was the question that was asked. And dealing with that, instead of proposing this other thing and framing it in terms of fear. Oh, you have to be scared. No, they don't have to be scared. Sometimes it's not about fear. It's simply about making the best or making the optimum choices in the situation that you're in, mitigating the risk of failure, giving yourself the most chance for success. And that's all it's about. So when you're disrupting these types of things, there's a cost to that. Sure, it feels great to just leap out here and be free and just make these choices. But there's also a flip side to that. There's cost to that. And so I would encourage you, whether you're talking about going out here and living and working remotely, going out on your own and being an entrepreneur, or if you're going to do them both. I've done them both. I've done them both at the same time. Really, you want to think about a simple phrase that I heard years ago. Don't be scared, be careful. And planning, if you play any sorts of strategy games like chess, you know you have to think optimally 4 or 5 moves ahead and have contingency plans. You want to be flexible. If I make 2 moves and something doesn't work, what's my contingency? I'm still moving forward. But I'm also thinking about what can happen and the moves that I can make if those things happen. And having insurance is one of those simple things that you can do, right? As I mentioned in the earliest example of being out in traffic, something to protect you from the worst case scenarios. And that's what you want to think about. You want to have that flexibility and intention and plan ahead and say, worst case scenario, if I get sick, worst case scenario, if I get in an accident, worst case scenario, if I lose my income. And so you start to strategize around that so that you can move forward and say, well, what are the things that I need to do? Those things can include having insurance, having alternate sources of income, having savings. All of these things are not falling back. You're still moving forward, but you're just thinking of ways that protect you so you can continue to move forward freely, bravely, and with whatever gusto you got. So I just wanted to leave you with that today and think about your moves forward in a different context. Don't frame it in terms of fear. You don't need to. Fear is not the issue. The issue is, do you have a plan in place? Do you have contingencies? Can you be flexible in the way that you move forward? I really hope that this helps. As I mentioned before, please click like, subscribe, and share if you think this is something that would help other people. I really appreciate the support on this channel, and I'm looking forward to making more videos. So have an amazing day, and I will talk to you next time. Cheers.